Welcome to the 22nd Annual Research Workshop with the theme, Why Institutions Matter for Industrial-led Development. We are really honored to have Honorable Dr. Philip Mpango, the Minister of Finance and Planning for the United Republic of Tanzania, as our guest of honor. Karibu sana, Dr. Mpango. To start up the program, I'm going to welcome our Executive Director, Dr. Donald Mmari, to give his welcoming remarks. As we continue in the session, I encourage you to tweet using the hashtag ARW2017. Donald.
Thank you very much, Regina. Guest of honor, Honorable Dr. Philip Isidore Mpango, Member of Parliament, Minister of Finance and Planning of the United Republic of Tanzania, Honorable Members of Parliament present, Your Excellency Ambassador Roeland van der Geer, Head of the Delegation of the European Union in Tanzania and the East African Community, Professor Adolf Mkenda, Permanent Secretary, Minister of Industry, Trade and Investments, Professor Yadon Kohi, Chairperson of the Board of Directors of REPOA, Professor Lance Pritchett, our keynote speaker, Excellencies, Ambassadors and Heads of diplomatic missions present, members of the press, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased and privileged to welcome you to the 22nd REPOA's Annual Research Workshop. Karibuni sana. I must also express REPOA's sincere appreciation to the guest of honor, Honorable Dr. Philip Mpango, for setting aside time to grace this occasion. We all know how heavy the workload is for our leaders as they contend with many development challenges facing our country. Our country is relatively very large, and the task of supervising development in a context of uneven resource endowment, diversity of geography, population distribution, and infrastructure development is not easy. We appreciate efforts and hard work that the fifth phase government is putting to accelerate socio-economic transformation led by industrialization. The core business of REPOA since its establishment in 1994 has been to generate knowledge through research and to contribute to policy research capacity. While the institution's initial focus revolved around the understanding of causes and means of eradicating poverty in its multidimensional forms, it became apparently clear that efforts to eradicate poverty cannot only be sustained if economic growth is accelerated and economic structure transformed in ways that promote inclusive development. This recognition has shaped the growth of REPOA over the last 22 years and the design of our current research program and the strategy of our engagement with our partners. The ultimate purpose of what we do is to improve the quality of life of the people of Tanzania and beyond. While many actors contribute to this ultimate purpose, our role of carrying out independent and credible research and share our findings through publications, policy briefs, policy seminars, and roundtables, and media briefs remains important. But this is not enough. We also engage very proactively and directly with the government and the other actors in reviewing and developing policies and in designing of development interventions. We provide independent views and assessments of what is working and what is not, and propose options for achieving better results. The annual research workshop is our landmark event that brings together policymakers and other development actors with researchers and academicians from Tanzania and around the world. We have continuously reviewed our research program to make it relevant and responsive to the national development agenda. Industrialization, enterprise growth, trade and employment dynamics form an important pillar of our research agenda. We consider these as critical pillars to supporting structural transformation, grounded on the foundation of our natural resource endowment. The analysis of the changing structure of the economy and the underlying drivers of structural transformation is an important work we do to inform policy directions for enhancing inclusiveness and the participation of citizens in the development process. Our social protection work has focused on the transformative role of social protection to promote income stability, human capabilities, and to prevent deprivation. And finally, governance and accountability are equally important aspects of our research program, as it is our conviction that an inclusive and participatory system of governance is fundamental for transparent, accountable, and efficient delivery of public goods. As an evolving and growing national think tank, REPOA works in collaboration with other national, regional, and international research and policy organizations, some of which are represented at this workshop today. Our core values that revolve on objectivity, quality, professionalism, and steady proactive engagement in contributing to policy development have earned us a very high reputation nationally and globally. It is for this reason that the global survey conducted by the Think Tank and Civil Societies program at the University of Pennsylvania have ranked REPOA as the top think tank in Tanzania for 3 consecutive years. REPOA has also moved up the rank in sub-Saharan Africa, up from 18th to 13th position out of 92 think tanks in sub-Saharan Africa. I feel obliged to recognize in public those organizations that are supporting our work in different forms, particularly the core institutional support, capacity development, and long-term financing of research collaborations. These are Embassy of Sweden, Embassy of Norway, IDRC Canada through the Think Tank Initiative, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation through the African Capacity Building Foundation. Others are supporting us through collaborative research grants, and these include the Irish Embassy, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, IDRC, DANIDA, the World Bank, ARC, World Food Program, UNICEF, CDD, Ghana, Institute of Development Studies, Nairobi, Oxford Policy Management, ODI, World Economic Forum, IFPRI, the Prime Minister's Office responsible for labor and employment, Poverty Eradication Division in the Ministry of Finance and Planning, President's Office Planning Commission, and many other ministries, departments, and agencies. I may not have mentioned all of them, but we very much appreciate the support from all the partners we have worked with. I'm also tempted to recognize the role played by our significant past core funders, the embassies of the Netherlands and Denmark. I believe they will support us again in the days to come, and many others will join too. The core financial support to think tanks is critical for sustained provision of public goods, such as the production of knowledge, research capacity building, publications, and evidence-based policy dialogue. It is a known fact that endowments and foundations in Africa are rare, and public and private sector funding of research is also very limited. Let me also extend our sincere gratitude to the delegation of the European Union in Tanzania for the generous support, financial support for organizing this workshop. We also thank the International Growth Center, IGC, CRDB Bank PLC, and Commercial Bank of Africa, who have covered some cost of this workshop. I believe the support will be extended towards our core support for research capacity and policy dialogue in the near future. The presentations in this workshop are structured around the theme, Why Institutions Matter for Industrialization-led Development. This is a very logical extension of our last year's workshop, whose theme was Making Industrialization Work for Socio-economic Transformation. The decision to pursue this subject further was informed by 2 factors. First, the emphasis our government is putting on industrialization, and second, the evolution of industrialization and industrial policy around the globe. The national drive towards accelerated industrialization is well articulated in the second 5-year development plan, which REPOA engaged very actively in informing its development. Despite the effects of slow economic growth in the aftermath of financial crisis and economic recession, Tanzania has remained one of the fastest growing countries in Africa, with GDP growth rates averaging 6.9% annually over the period between 2011 and 2015. This is above 5.3% average growth for East Africa during the same period. The manufacturing share of GDP, however, has remained low at 5.2% of GDP by 2015. Elsewhere in Africa, industrialization growth has not been rapid enough as aspired. However, efforts to promote manufacturing industries have intensified in countries like Botswana, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Mauritius. The challenge for these countries and for Tanzania alike is on how to make this agenda successful and at pace that can rapidly engender sustained economic growth, job creation, and poverty reduction. Africa have received many policy advisors at different periods. In the mid-1980s, policy advice revolved around a departure from state-driven investments in industries towards market-oriented development dictated by prices and other market incentives. This narrative evolved to the so-called Washington Consensus in the 1990s, which emphasized on the set of good governance practices by the state, including the provision of conducive business environment and good infrastructure for private sector to thrive. The continued market failures and persistent coordination failures have led to renewed interest in the discourse of industrial policy. Drawing from the successes of Southeast Asia, advocates of new industrial policy argue that states can play crucial roles to address persistent development challenges. The challenges confronting sub-Saharan Africa include low productivity, growing urbanization, and expanding informal sector, which cannot easily be dealt with in a pure market structure. In seeking the answers to this paradox of failures of markets or governments when working in isolation, the broader aspects of institutions and the political economy underpinning the development process in general and the industrialization agenda in particular is very central. That is why this topic is both timely and relevant in the discourse of Tanzanian development at this time. Guest of honor, we are very confident that your opening address will provide some guidance to our deliberations on the institutional foundations and change we need to foster the noble drive towards industrialization to succeed. We are pleased to have Professor Lant Pritchett from the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University, who have traveled from the United States to deliver a keynote paper on the subject. Professor Pritchett is also a senior fellow of the Center for Global Development. He was co-editor of the Journal of Development Economics and worked as a consultant and advisor to many large and reputable organizations, including the World Bank and Google. He is well-traveled around the world and has authored many articles and books relevant to the subject we are discussing. The keynote address will be discussed by three speakers: Professor Ben Ondulu, Governor of the Central Bank, Gwakisa Bapula, who is representing Mrs. Bengi Issa, the Executive Secretary of the National Economic Empowerment Council. And Dr. Samuel Nyantahe, the Chairman of Confederation of Tanzanian Industries, was to be here, but unfortunately he had just sent a message that he fell ill, so he could not be here. So the two discussants will discuss the keynote of Professor Pritchett. The first session this morning will be chaired by Dr. Sevasius Likwelile from the Economics Department at the University of Dar es Salaam, who has also previously served as permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance and also previously the Director of Research at REPOA many years ago, and also a former member of the board. We do hope that, your guest of honor, that your schedule would allow you to listen to the keynote and the views of the discussants. Apart from the keynote presentations during the opening session, there will be other presentations and panel discussions from experts and distinguished leaders and scholars from Tanzania and the other countries, selected strategically to share their experiences on this subject. Guest of honor, please allow me to recognize those who have traveled long distances to share with their experiences and insights on the subject. I will not attempt to mention each one by name, but will recognize the countries they have come from different institutions. These are the United States of America, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, France, South Africa, Vietnam, Mozambique, Kenya, Norway, Ghana, Uganda, Nigeria, Canada, and Zimbabwe. I hope I've not left anyone. But I would like to recognize Deborah Bryson, Professor Bryson, who served in the first steering committee when REPOA was established in 1994, who is here today. I believe each one in this workshop expects that the diverse knowledge and experience represented here will generate informed exchange and recommendations that will subsequently be synthesized to inform policymakers and the other development stakeholders in the efforts to promote industrial transformation for inclusive development and social progress in Tanzania. We encourage all of you to participate fully and share your views during the 2 days of the workshop. I take this opportunity to thank most sincerely all the speakers, panelists, chairpersons, discussants, and all distinguished participants for sparing your valuable time to be part of REPOA's 22nd Annual Research Workshop during the next 2 days. I would like also to thank NOCOM, our event coordinator based in Belgium and Slovenia, for the hard work to making this event successful. At the end of this workshop, we expect to have achieved the following. First, shared knowledge and experience on the institutional foundations for industrialization-led transformation for inclusive development. Secondly, generated a synthesis report which we will share with the government and other policymakers. Third, supported research capacity through the poster presentations which are part of this workshop. And finally, to have generated new ideas to inform our future research agenda. I once again express our sincere gratitude to the guest of honor and welcome you all to this workshop. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Donald. And in particular, in recognizing Professor Deborah Bryson, where most of us who are working for REPOA were actually not even there. So karibu sana Tanzania, and everyone else, welcome to Tanzania. As we proceed, I now would like to welcome His Excellency Roeland van der Geer, the head of EU Delegation to Tanzania and the East African Community, to give us his remarks representing the development partners. Karibu sana.
Yeah, asante sana. And before I start to say what, as the minister said, I'm told to say, let me first say, Mr. Mmari, Dr. Mmari, you've done it again. You've again brought a large group of people from all over the world, and seen from here, from where we speak, it is a magnificent view. Many people I know, but I'm very happy to say also many new faces from all over the world. You mentioned, you recognize those making long trips from abroad, but I really feel that under the current traffic conditions, you should also recognize those coming from Dar es Salaam. And those going back to Dar es Salaam later in the day. But Minister, in the first place, P.S. Mkenda, Prof. Mkenda, the other at the table, Mr. Pritchard, Mr. Kohi, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, a few quick words from the side of the European Union, a few quick shots. In general, about institutions and industrialization, a few words about Tanzania, a few words about our own experiences in Europe, for better and for worse, and a few quick conclusions. And let me say that my team and myself, I have brought all the experts from the EU delegation with me. We are very much looking forward to these discussions and to these consultations, because, Minister and Mr. Mmari, I think what we need most at this point in time in Tanzania is consultations between all those involved, consultations between government and the private sector, between government and the academic societies, but also between government and the international community. And Mr. Mmari, you've done that again, and also for that I'm extremely grateful. Institutions, ladies and gentlemen, the subject that you are going to analyze over the coming few days, institutions, of course, are absolutely key to industrialization, that is clear. Strong institutions can provide the strong regulatory environment in which industrialization can begin, it can develop, grow, and flourish. A predictable, and I would like to really underline that word, predictable, clear, open, transparent environment in which investors and entrepreneurs, be it from within our country, Tanzania, or from abroad, feel confident to commit, that is essential for industrialization. And the creation of such an environment, of strong institutions, is of course the job of government. But it is also the job of the private sector, which should form its own strong institutions in which producers are united, linking all those involved in the different value chains. It's not just a matter of government to create institutions, it's also the private sector which should play its role and take its responsibility. Seen from the European Union, running a business is not government business. The experience with government business on the whole are most unfavorable in Europe and also around us. But regulation, we feel, is important. Government should play its role, and without strong institutions, industry, in our view, will not flourish. Tanzania is a diverse country, endowed with good soils, rich natural resources, and it is a very diverse economy which provides a solid basis for further industrial development. Tanzania's 5-year development plan, Mr. Mmari already mentioned it, outlines new intervention to enable the country to industrialize in a way that will transform both the economy and society. And of course, Tanzania's development vision 2025 aspires to have Tanzania transformed into a middle-income and semi-industrialized country by 2025. As Tanzania embarks on its industrialization process, it is essential to incorporate, to learn the lessons from our early attempts to socio-economic transformation and ensure that these experiences are integrated in our current attempts. And the second 5-year development plan defines the country's background and the objectives behind its development strategy, describing actions, funding, monitoring, evaluation. Government has set the framework towards transformation. It has, of course, the responsibility to fill the blanks with adequate regulations and sector policies. And it needs to ensure coherence, consistency, stability, and as I said earlier, predictability of policies and implementation. And most important, and I repeat it, it has to engage with all the other social, political, and economic stakeholders, which are vital for the plan's success and also for the eventual emergence of industrialization. The government, of course, we ask all of us to provide the leadership and the support to all other stakeholders to direct their efforts toward a common goal. Roles, therefore, are being defined, they must be defined, and the space to act to the different stakeholders should be freed. From private sector to civil society, from academia to financial institutions, they must all be active in this drive. And the 5-year plan, of course, states very clearly that industrialization promotion has remained high in the country's development agenda since the early days of independence. Industrialization is a main route to growth, but as we often say in Europe, it requires resilience. It is more, as we say, a marathon than it is a sprint, but sometimes there are elements of the sprint in it. We found in Europe that there is no unique and successful formula for industrialization, but past experience show that adequate regulations combined with incentives for upgrading technology, for promoting skilled labor and the promotion of foreign capital, among others, have contributed to achieve growth and subsequent increases in income. Let me underline, speaking also on behalf of other development partners, that also the European Union is ready to assist Tanzania in its drive for industrialization. If I just say a few words now about how the European Union looks at its assistance, then I would like to underline that in the current review of our development policies, blending of grants and loans, the building of blending, is a central element, providing a grant element to a financial package to stimulate concessional and non-concessional loans. We think, and we like to think, that by providing relatively small amounts of EU grant funds, relatively large amounts of concessional and even non-concessional loans can be freed. The EU considers this strategic cooperation, the smart application of small funds to attain very substantial results. But also the newly launched European Investment Plan for Africa will be a major tool to assist, amongst others, Tanzania in its drive for industrialization. And let me here also point at the European Investment Bank, which current portfolio amounts to over €500 million in Tanzania alone, and it includes an important industrial component. For the European Union, also the famous, and can I also say infamous, economic partnership agreements are important tools to assist industrialization. They provide increased access to the European market, and it also asks, in the long run, 15, 20, 30 years from now, the markets of our counterparts to open. Trade agreements with international partners, in our view, are vital for Tanzania. And in the case of Tanzania, of course, it will be essential to define trade policies and to base these trade policies on its agricultural and industrial policies. Trade and industrialization are closely related, and in the EU, more than 70% of total trade is intra-European trade. And if you take into account that the EU, with 550 million people, represents 25% of the world economy, you can see how important these internal trade flows will eventually be. Let me also mention that we do have here a very strong European business group which is looking at assisting Tanzania in its industrialization. And that brings me to a few words on our current in-country development program, in which energy, agriculture and governance are essential. All these three sectors are of great importance for the furthering of industrialization, with energy, of course, being a basic condition for industrialization. But in a country as richly endowed with agricultural resources as Tanzania, the provision of added value through agro-industry, agro-processing and agro-business is clear. And here Tanzania can achieve, in our view, substantial results in the short term, and therefore the EU is active in the value chains that are so essential to Tanzania, such as coffee, tea, and horticulture. Let me finally point at the close cooperation at a higher level between the European Union and its sister organization, the African Union, but also between the European Union and the East African community. And in all these transnational, above national cooperation, industrialization and urbanization play important roles. And we do think that the discussion between Europe and Africa on industrialization and on the international dimensions of industrialization, and also on the institutions that are required at an international level to promote industrialization, are extremely important. Ladies and gentlemen, at a slighter, lighter note, let me say, but not less important note, I would like to end by saying that the delegation of the European Union in Tanzania and REPOA work closely together. But also the EU member states in Tanzania work closely with REPOA, and as Ms. Mmari has already mentioned, also other international partners are of great importance for the cooperation between REPOA and the international community. 12 of the 28 EU member states here in Dar are represented here today. A number of them, I'm happy to say, by their ambassadors, and that clearly shows the commitment to REPOA, to its director, and to its staff, and to the objective for which REPOA stands. Therefore, it is, and I come back where I started, it is so important to see this venue filled with people who have come from all over the world. I wish you a very productive conference, and I'm looking forward to your insights and conclusions, which I will ensure that the EU, which I like to think continues to be a learning organization, I will ensure that the EU will make also the best use of your recommendations. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Roeland van der Geer. One of the important points that Ambassador insisted is the importance of having dialogue with different stakeholders. And in a particular way, I would like to recognize the members of parliament who have joined us today kutoka katika kamati ya viwanda, biashara na mazingira. I kindly ask you to stand so that the audience can see you and recognize you. Karibuni sana. Thank you so much for joining us. So in as much as he hinted about Dar es Salaam, we have a lot of people from Dodoma. Even the minister himself also came from Dodoma. So thank you very much. I would now like to take this opportunity to welcome the chairperson of our board of directors, Professor Major General Retired Yadon Kohi, to welcome the guest of honor. Karibu, Professor Kohi.
Our guest of honor, the Honorable Philip Isidore Mpango, in your capacity representing the Prime Minister. Before you here are more than 300 delegates, including members of the Parliament who are also here from the Committee on Industry, and the representatives of a cross-section between partners and stakeholders of research and development. And with the background that we all are originating from institutions, I think it could not be more appropriate for you to represent your own institution in this forum. And we all look forward to hearing from you. My role is as simple as that, to invite you in your capacity to speak to us. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Roeland van der Geer, the head of the EU delegation to Tanzania and also the East African community. Honorable members of Parliament, particularly the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Industry, Trade and the Environment, Excellencies, ambassadors, and members of the diplomatic corps present, Professor Mkenda, the Permanent Secretary, Minister of Industry and Trade, Professor Yadon Kohi, Chairman of the Board of Directors of REPOA, Dr. Mmari, the Executive Director of REPOA, Professor Alan Pritchett from Harvard University. As I told you when we met in the side room there, you taught me without knowing from your numerous world-famous publications. Distinguished discussants, I recognize former ministers, retired permanent secretaries, senior government officials, distinguished delegates from overseas, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It is a humbling experience for me to be standing here this morning to grace the occasion of REPOA's 22nd annual research workshop on behalf of the Right Honorable Kassim Majaliwa, Member of Parliament and Prime Minister of the United Republic of Tanzania, who could not be here with you today because of other pressing national commitments, both in Dodoma and Dar es Salaam. However, he did direct me to convey to all of you a very warm welcome to this very important workshop being held here in Dar es Salaam. He further asked me to assure you that Tanzania is a peaceful country with very friendly people, and that I should encourage you, and especially our guests from outside Tanzania, to use your time here alongside this workshop to sample Tanzania's unique treasures and tourist attractions. Please try not to leave this country without seeing with your own eyes the mighty Serengeti that is famous for the spectacular migration of wildebeests, the Olduvai Gorge, which is the cradle of mankind, and also the incredible composition of wildlife in neighboring Ngorongoro crater. You can go south to the extensive Selous Game Reserve. You will not be disappointed. There is the imposing Mount Kilimanjaro, the rooftop of Africa, at 589 meters above sea level. There are numerous gemstones, diamonds, gold, tanzanite, name it, as well as the spicy islands of Zanzibar, to mention but a few. You'll certainly never regret having stayed on for an extra day in Tanzania. But furthermore, the Prime Minister extends his best wishes for a very successful conference. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have been told that the theme for this workshop is why institutions matter for industrialization-led development. This is indeed a timely and well-conceived theme that dovetails quite well with the country's second five-year development plan, which runs from 2016-17 to 2020-2021. The theme of the plan is nurturing industrialization for economic transformation and human development. I therefore commend REPOA for the spot-on choice of the theme and for having continued to undertake research to promote policy dialogue on this subject matter. I thought I had forgotten, but Dr. Mmari confirmed that the theme of the last REPOA annual research workshop was on making industrialization work for socio-economic transformation. And I'm very happy to say that we in government harvested a lot from the workshop, from that workshop of last year, in preparation of the second five-year development plan. At that time, I was still leading the National Planning Commission. Anyway, in the same vein, the government is anxiously waiting for recommendations from this workshop. We believe the recommendations will help us sharpen national plans and strategies to fast-track industrialization in Tanzania going forward. Distinguished participants, as some of you may know, industrialization endeavors in Tanzania date back as far as the 1970s, with the basic industry strategy and the import substitution manufacturing that characterized the third five-year development plan of 1974 to 1979. And subsequent policies and strategies, which included the Sustainable Industrial Development Policy 2020 and the Integrated Industrial Development Strategy, provided broad guidelines for the country to industrialize. The privatization of state-owned enterprises was among the measures taken from the mid-80s, hoping to increase efficiency, productivity, and competitiveness of the manufacturing industry. However, the results of the privatization were mixed. Some industries were turned around and performed well, and some actually to the point of positioning themselves to compete internationally. However, others simply failed even to get off the ground. Dear participants, new industries have also been established over the years, and as the data shows, manufacturing exports have grown significantly in recent years, while the share of traditional exports have declined from nearly 40% of total goods exported in 2000, it went down to 16% in 2015. The share of non-traditional exports has increased from 60% to 83.8% during the same period. And out of the non-traditional exports, manufactured exports accounted for 9.8% in 2000, but this share had increased to 33.1% by 2015. Despite this encouraging growth in exports and a robust real GDP growth of 7% per annum, which is faster than our population growth of 2.7%, these improvements have remained insufficient to create the much-needed jobs for the growing number of youth, technological innovation, and increased productivity, which are really very essential ingredients of sustained poverty reduction. Our basic needs poverty number for Tanzania remains high at 28.2%. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Margareta Hanus, writing in 2015, professed as follows, and I quote, "If you want to predict the prosperity of a country, just look at its institutions. End of the quote. This is, to me, surely an insightful clue which researchers of the kind present in this room need to investigate and get to the bottom of the apparent failure of countries like Tanzania to industrialize. And therefore, I want to urge this conference to seriously discuss the fundamental question, which is, what institutional architecture is needed to diversify the Tanzanian economy towards higher productivity activities in manufacturing, in agriculture, and services? In other words, if we are to consider Tanzania's generally accepted procedures that govern interaction between members of our society, whether it is legal, regulatory, political, policies, and even religions and our cultures, which of these institutions matter most for fast-tracking industrialization? This is a basic question I want to leave to you. Yes, institutions matter, but which are the most potent in terms of fast-tracking our industrialization endeavors? We in government shall be waiting eagerly to get a response from think tanks like REPOA and others, and the brains in the room, but of course backed up by good, credible research work in this area. Ladies and gentlemen, may I also suggest to you to discuss the role of other critical institutions, including Parliament, and even the military, the law enforcement agencies. What about the government coordination machinery, development partners, labor unions, banks and financial institutions, and so on? What is their role in spearheading industrial development? Suggestively, you will need to scrutinize, among others, where each specific country stands with respect to the standards of corporate ethical behavior, legal and administrative framework and practices, the organizations of the private sector, and even chambers of commerce and industry, dialogue and attitudes towards work. Don't shy away from questioning government efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability, corruption tolerance, as well as trust and integrity of the politicians. Distinguished participants, the need for broader institutional reforms is clearly reflected in the efforts of the fifth phase government under His Excellency Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli, which he is taking in building and strengthening the institutional foundation of industrialization-driven transformation and development of our country. And let me outline some of these efforts. First, this government has launched a frontal attack on corruption, including the establishment of a special division of the High Court to handle corruption cases. Corruption has remained a significant obstacle to delivery of quality public services and business development. And if you look at the Global Competitiveness Report of 2015-16, corruption was ranked second among the most problematic factors of doing business in Tanzania. But let me emphasize again that each one of us in government, in the private sector, we need to adhere to ethical business behavior. It is important that we adhere to the laws and regulations, ensure transparency. Secondly, His Excellency the President has been leading a fundamental transformation in the way the government operates so as to improve efficiency and tackle complacency, bureaucracy, red tape, and indecision in government. We have also put energy to ensuring judicious management and use of the country's public resources. And the government has also continued to crack down on tax evaders and dishonest or corrupt officials in our revenue collection agencies, including the Tanzania Revenue Authority. Thirdly, we have continued to invest in infrastructure in our bid to address constraints to movement of goods, services, and people. And this includes investment in trunk road network, rural roads, upgrading our rail network, expanding the capacity and operational efficiency of our ports, also transport capacity by modernizing our airports and building new ones. And we are even reviving the Air Tanzania Corporation. We are scaling up investment in energy, targeting to provide efficient and reliable energy at least cost. And we think this is really needed to power industries, businesses, and households. We have major projects, gas-to-power projects around Mtwara and Lindi regions. We have done a natural gas pipeline from Mtwara to Dar es Salaam. We have built power generation plants around Dar es Salaam in Kinyerezi. We are upgrading our transmission lines. We have embarked on a major project to electrify the rural areas. And we are doing all this because infrastructure development is a very important prerequisite, not just for successful industrialization, but also for supporting agricultural transformation. Fourthly, the government is determined to streamline business regulations, including reduction of multiple taxes. And we feel these are all very important determinants to the cost and complexity of doing business, and also to attracting domestic and international private capital, which are essential as we embark on our mission to promote industrialization in Tanzania. We have made deliberate efforts to expand access to basic education for our children at all levels of education. We have even endeavored to waive fees for primary and secondary schools. We have constructed many more schools. We have embarked on making sure that the requisite infrastructure for our kids and teaching facilities are improved. But of course, there have been challenges, but we couldn't wait. We'll continue addressing some of the challenges as we move ahead. Now, the challenges that face our people are not just limited to basic education, the technical skills, ethics, and so on. The challenges are combined with the structural limitations to our economy to escalate some of our challenges. We have embarked on skills development programs. We want to equip our youth with skills needed in industry, and particularly for textiles, leather, and agro-industries. And we think this will enhance employment opportunities in existing and new manufacturing entities. Ladies and gentlemen, these are a few among the initiatives in the institutional change process that we in government are undertaking to build strong foundations for successful transformation of the Tanzanian economy. But clearly, this cannot be the role of government alone. While the government must take the lead, other institutions must also play their roles. Distinguished participants, I wish to reiterate that the desire to accelerate transformation of our economy driven by industrialization is only possible if all institutions play their roles well. We have an enviable natural resource base and strategic geographical location. The global investment and trade dynamics provide threats as well as opportunities for Tanzania to industrialize, but we now need stronger institutional cooperation, proactive participation of all stakeholders, the citizens rallying behind the government by working hard and promoting discipline, development-oriented mindsets, and moral values that will make all of us proudly accountable to our future generation. Let me propose a few questions for this workshop, which I consider to be pertinent to the theme of the workshop and for informing policies and strategies that I requested for. First, in the context of the current trajectory of Tanzania's development, what forms of institutions will be the most enabling to achieve our industrialization goals? Second question, how does Tanzania compare with recent success stories of industrial transformation from emerging economies, and what are the institutional conditions that made the difference? And thirdly, in theory, the state and market institutions may have different objectives and the ways of achieving them. However, in practice, they can reinforce each other for self-sustenance. In what ways, then, should the two institutions work more effectively to facilitate the industrialization agenda? As I'm about to conclude, I want to welcome the call made by His Excellency, the Ambassador, calling for constant dialogue and consultations between government, private sector, and stakeholders. This is critical for industrialization. We need to build trust. We need to build confidence of all the players, both in the private sector and in government, as well as friends of Tanzania. Surely there is no substitute for clear rules, but it is also important that every one of us, each of the stakeholders, must play a clear, a transparent game. I wish to reiterate the appreciation of government on the important role that REPOA has been playing as a Tanzanian think tank. I'm made to understand that REPOA was this year again ranked as the top think tank in Tanzania for the third year running. Congratulations. And has moved 5 places up from the 13th position among over 90 think tanks in sub-Saharan Africa. Please maintain this good performance and be assured of the government's continued support in creating the right environment for REPOA and other think tanks in the country to thrive and continue to provide empirical evidence for effective policy development. I want to extend my profound appreciation on behalf of the government to all the development partners that have continued to provide core funding and long-term support to REPOA. And this, as we heard, includes the embassies of Sweden and Norway, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation through the African Capacity Building Foundation, as well as the think tank initiative administered by the International Development Research Center, IDRC, of Canada. I also want to thank the European Union Delegation for providing financial support to REPOA, for organizing this workshop, and the International Growth Center, who also covered some of the workshop costs, as we heard. I know there are many other partners who provide significant project funding and collaboration with REPOA. Your support assures us of continued access to high-quality research, capacity building, and informed policy dialogue. And these are essential public goods in any modern society. And I urge you and other partners to continue to support this noble cause to the Tanzanian society. Distinguished participants, it is now my honor and privilege, on behalf of the Right Honorable Prime Minister, to declare REPOA's 22nd Annual Research Workshop officially open. Thank you for your kind attention.
Dr. Philip Mpango, Minister for Finance and Planning, Professor Adolf Mkenda, Permanent Secretary, Minister of Industry and Trade, Your Excellency, Ambassador Roeland, Geer, Head of EU Delegation to Tanzania and the East African Community, Professor Major General Retired Yadon Kohi, Chairperson REPOA Board of Directors, ambassadors present here, leaders of political parties, senior government officials, representatives from civil society and the private sector. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity, first of all, to thank our guests of honor to have given us this golden opportunity to be with us this morning, to share with us what we are going to discuss about industrialization and the role of institutions. The guests of honor, let me also thank you for bringing us greetings from Honorable Prime Minister for not having been able to come here. We thank you for that. And definitely we are also going to ask you to send back our appreciations. Guests of honor, for us REPOA, your coming here has shown us continued cooperation between REPOA and the government of the United Republic of Tanzania. This is not the first time the government has given us this opportunity to be with us in our annual research workshops. We have had many occasions where the government has been here in different capacities. And today you have actually shown that the cooperation we have been having has also been cemented and is growing stronger and stronger as days go by. Guests of honor, your speech was very inspiring, particularly given the fact that it was very much related to the theme for this annual conference on why institutions matter for industrialization-led development. You raised very important issues which are definitely going to lead us in our discussions. First of all, you gave us right-hand information about what the government as an institution is doing to ensure that the process of industrialization is actually proceeding as planned by the government. You have even given us a good number of questions, which we might venture to respond to in our discussions, which are going to give us a very good highlight on what institutions can do to make industrialization work in Tanzania. Guests of honor, you even gave us right-hand information on what the government is doing, and this has been very encouraging, knowing that the government is actually touching on a number of issues as creating a base for industrialization in Tanzania. More importantly, you also gave us a highlight on the dynamic and diversity of institutions which are responsible to ensure that industrialization works. You gave us a good list, and you even gave us a highlight on how they can collaborate and work together to ensure that each one of them is doing their job. You even also went further to propose the whole question of constant dialogue and consultation, not only between the institutions, but also between the institutions and government, including institutions like REPOA and other stakeholders, to make sure that industrialization works. Guests of honor, for us, REPOA, we value these inputs from the government, but we also appreciate the value the government puts on REPOA, particularly trying to engage REPOA in very key functions like making input to the second 5-year development plan. This gives us encouragement and inspiration that what REPOA is doing in terms of research is going to have space for inputting in our policies and in programs for our national development. Guests of honor, there are lots of things you highlighted and gave us as inspiration for these discussions we are going to hold within the 2 days. And I just want to assure you that these questions you gave us and all the other issues you raised are going to facilitate and help us in our discussions. And lastly, I would like to express our appreciation that, as you rightly said, the government is going to wait for our recommendations. We want to assure you that whatever comes from this workshop is going to be channeled to the government, because we are also hoping that the deliberations are going to have a good impact in terms of policy transformation and programming in our government. Let me finish by thanking you again and again, and we wish to be with you for the coming session so that we can still get your input as one of us in these discussions. Thank you very much.